Today, we see and read about injustice happening around us, be it to some individuals or communities around the world. Be it racism we see in the United States, or be a systematic design of laws to delegitimize Muslims in India, and similar efforts against Uyghurs in China. But have you ever wondered why do we see it increasing in recent times? It wasn't that people weren't racist in the United States earlier, or there wasn't any religious discrimination in India. The things have changed, which is leading to this widespread protest, is the fact that now these incidents are run by institutional discrimination. Earlier, all the discriminations, be it racial or religious, was between individuals. But now, there has been an institutional legitimization for this discrimination. The institutions, the ruling polity, which had the responsibility to maintain justice and fairness in the society, are now propagating injustice for their personal gains. Welcome to Books and Brew, and today I'll talk about the idea of justice as proposed by John Rawls in his book called Theory of Justice. It was published in early 1970s. I'll talk about three ideas from the book I liked and try explaining why this old book of political philosophy is all the more important to be revisited in these times. And there wouldn't be justice to the title of this show, Books and Brew, if I don't talk about brewing. So later, I'll also talk about stouts. These are one of my favorite types of beer. And we'll go into the varieties of stouts and also some basics of brewing it. The first idea I'll talk about today is basically setting some ground rules for understanding of the book. John Rawls, in his book, proposes two principles of justice, which are basically the central theme of his theory of justice. And the way he comes at this theory in the course of this book is by a set of thought experiments, starting from an ideal situation and then adding complexities to explain the real situation that we live in. He starts the book with an idea which he calls the original position. This is his version of the social contract theory. It basically means that the fundamental principles or laws by which we govern the society should be made in such a way that they are fair irrespective of your position in the society. So basically, we are behind a veil of ignorance, is what he calls it. It's a very important idea, so let me break this further. Let's assume, as a policymaker, you decide that the state should have a specific religion as an official religion of the state. And then you decide upon which religion should that be, taking into consideration or rather ignoring that you belong to that religion. So the laws that you make should be just and fair for you even if you don't belong to that religion which is chosen as the official religion. Let me give a second example. Let's say you are a man at a decision making position in an organization. When you are about to set pay scale for men and women, you should ignore the fact that you are a man so as to decide on the pay structure which is just, fair, and probably rational and would not make you feel cheated upon if you are a woman. So you cannot really say that men will earn twice as more as women does. Rawls believe that if you follow this veil of ignorance in making laws or principles of the institution, we will eventually end up with a fair and just system. Let me give another example which we can use in our daily life. Next time you share, let's say, a cake with your friend, the rule should be that the one who divides the cake into two isn't the one who chooses the piece first. So here there is a veil of ignorance that you don't know which piece belongs to you. So you, as the cake slicer, if that's the word, you will try to make equal halves so that you don't get a smaller piece. Of course, here I am assuming that you and your friend both like the cake. So this law of cake slicing inherently is fair since it's designed with the idea of veil of ignorance. It's easy to understand this idea using a cake example, but it becomes more complicated when you make laws for a society. But again, no one said that political philosophy is a piece of cake. Pun intended. Moving on. So this idea of veil of ignorance has to be used for designing laws irrespective of religion, race, wealth, gender, beliefs, so on and so forth. The second idea I'll talk about is basically the first principle of justice Rawls mentioned in his theory of justice. It goes something like this, and I quote: each person is to have an equal right to the most extensive total system of equal basic liberties compatible with the similar system of liberty for all. Stop quote. It might come up as a little complicated, so if I just have to unpack, what it essentially means is there should be an equal liberty for all. And this principle, this first principle of Rawls' theory of justice, is also called equal liberty principle. So, what are these liberties Rawls is talking about? So, these are freedom of thought, liberty of conscience, the political liberties, freedom of association, and finally, rights and liberties covered by the rule of law, or basically the constitution. So, one of such liberties is basically a person's right to hold a personal property or a person's right to follow his own religion. So, this first principle of Rawls' theory of justice or equal liberty principle is very easy to understand and feels very obvious that it should be given to each and every individual. However, unfortunately, this basic principle, which seems so obvious, is being touched upon by the current political establishments and has been downplayed to affect a specific community in that country. And if we also look at this first principle of justice through the idea of veil of ignorance, we can see that if I get the maximum political liberty or any form of liberty Rawls lists, then the other person should also get the same liberty, because under the veil of ignorance, I do not know which side I will be on, whether I'll be a majority or a minority. The third idea that I want to talk about today is basically the second principle of justice that Rawls proposes. And it is divided into two sub principles. The first sub principle goes something like this, and I quote: social and economic inequalities are just so that they are to the greatest benefit of the least advantaged. Stop quote. And the second sub principle goes something like this, and I quote: social and economic inequalities are just if they are attached to the offices and positions open to all. Stop quote. So the part A of the second principle is also referred to as the difference principle, while the part B of the second principle is referred to as equal opportunity principle. So through second principle of justice, Rawls is trying to justify that social and economic inequalities are accepted and are just in a society if they give equal opportunity for all and they benefit the least advantaged person. So, the main beauty of the theory of justice proposed by Rawls, I feel, is based on this second principle. Here, he says that in a real world, a social economic inequalities can be justified if the inequalities are open to all. That means those inequalities are equal for everyone out there. And from here is the equal opportunity principle that comes out. Similarly, again, the social and economic inequalities can be justified if the inequalities benefit all, which means that this inequality, be it social or economic, if it benefits the least advantaged, then it benefits all. And from here, you derive the difference principle of Rawls' theory. So let's go a little deeper into the equal opportunity principle. Let's take a real life example. We all know there is a widespread protest against billionaires who have their net worth of about $120 billion, while some of their employees are daily wage laborers and earn a mere $12 an hour. So we clearly see an social and economic inequality in here, right? But is this an unjust society? For that, Rawls suggests to look at the sources of inequality. The first one he mentions is legal inequality. So, is there a law that prohibits the daily wage laborer from becoming a billionaire? If there is such a law, then that is an unjust society. The second source of inequality is related to the birth status, which means, does the family in which a billionaire is born into give him an advantage to become a billionaire, while the daily wage laborer, if he is born to a daily wage laborer, that makes him disadvantaged to become a billionaire because he doesn't have the resources, the education, and he has to probably start working very early in his life. If this is the case, then the society is unjust. The third source of inequality is basically talent and effort. If the billionaire is highly talented, he has worked really hard in his life and has become a billionaire, while the daily wage laborer did not work hard, did not have the talent, and so he is not a billionaire. If this is the case, then the society is not unjust. So, if we have to look into these three cases, Rawls suggests that only when the inequality is because of talent and effort, that is justified. The other two cases, legal inequality and birth status related inequalities, make the society unjust. So Rawls suggests that this is when the government comes into picture. So the government should not make any law which prohibits a daily wage laborer from becoming a billionaire, which is mostly the case. And the second, the government should remove the advantage, or rather remove the disadvantage a person has being born into a daily wage laborer's family, so that he can become a billionaire. And in this regard, there are affirmative actions in United States and caste-based reservations in India, with the idea that the initial disadvantage of being born into a specific family should be taken care by the government, so that the individual is brought to a stage where he can compete with someone from a privileged family. Now let's look into the difference principle proposed by Rawls. Let's take the same example that we have been working on for our opportunity principle. So this billionaire with $120 billion of net worth and his some employees who are daily wage laborers earn $12 an hour. And as we had established already, there is a clear social and economic inequality. But according to the difference principle, this inequality can be justified if it makes better off to the least advantaged person. Let's say, in this case, the daily wage laborer is the least advantaged person. So, does the existence of this billionaire, or the fact that this billionaire and his company exists, can it justify the fact that there are a million jobs that are created? And let's say this billionaire did not exist. Was there a better opportunity for the daily wage laborer to earn something more than $12 an hour? If yes, then the society is unjust. But if not, then according to the difference principle proposed by Rawls, this inequality can be justified. So basically, the difference principle tries to get the better off for the least advantaged person. In our example, he is the daily wage laborer. So the reason I took these examples to explain the first principle of justice and both the second principles of justice is to make a point that this theory of justice has nothing to do with the right or the left side of the political spectrum. For example, the first principle is often violated by the political class who belong to the right wing of the political spectrum, and the second principle of justice is often violated by the political class who belong to the left wing of the political spectrum. So Rawls' theory has nothing to do with the right or the left of the political spectrum, and it's pretty neutral. So a system which follows the first and the second principles of justice is a just system according to Rawls. So a quote I'd like to take away from this book is start quote: "Justice is the first virtue of social institutions, as truth is to the systems of thought." Stop quote. This book is rated at about 3.9 on Goodreads, and it is a masterpiece of political philosophy. There has been a lot of opposing views and books to contradict the Rawlsian justice theory, but that is a topic for another day, another episode. I have a mixed feeling about this book. It has a great basic principles of justice which I believe everyone should read, but unfortunately the book is not very well written. It isn't an easy read and not an easy book to follow. And it's not just me, but I guess even Rawls knows it. And that's why in his book he has listed down some specific sections and chapters of the book which he insists the readers to read to get a grasp of his theory. It's over 550 pages long and which is compactly packed with a lot of ideas and thought experiments and philosophies. So it's not a very easy read. And the reason why it is not well written is because when he wrote this book, he kept on constantly getting criticism from other thinkers for what he proposed. And he kept on writing justifications for those criticisms and kept on adding them to his main manuscript. And during this process, it lost its entire flow. But nevertheless, the ideas and content in this book are very important and definitely a must read. So, who do I recommend this book to? I recommend this book to two kinds of people. First are the ones who have inclination towards understanding political philosophies and try to have a clear understanding of the role of institutions, government, society, and want to look beyond the cluttered politics that we see around the world. And the second type of people are the ones who use hand grinders to grind their everyday morning coffee because they are the ones with a lot of time at their hands to use a hand grinder in their morning routine. Anyways, I won't comment which category I fall into, but this ends a book discussion for this episode. Now let's get some stouts brewing. So stouts are typically dark, but not necessarily heavy or strong. The darkness is due to the use of roasted malts during its brewing process. You can try understand the color origin from the idea that there are different types of coffee roast, right? Like light, medium, dark, and that you can see in the color of your brewed coffee. And that's how roasted malts make stouts dark. Many prefer to have stouts for the winters and IPS for the summer and so on. But as Starks from Game of Thrones have always kept on saying, winter is coming. I guess they're essentially asking us to stock up on our stouts. There are a variety of stouts out there like dry stouts, oatmeal stout, milk stout, imperial stout. Dry stouts are basically black and brown in general, and because they use roasted barley, and the common flavors that you will get in them are of coffee, cocoa, and the likes. And they are also called Irish stouts actually. I guess because of the origin from where it started. Milk stouts, on the other hand, derive their name by the presence of lactose in them, and these are typically sweeter, creamier, tastier ones. So, what are oatmeal stouts then? No points for guessing. They are the ones which have oatmeal added to them during their brewing process. It has a rich and oily body because of the oatmeals that are included. Imperial stouts are the dark, strong beer and they typically have a higher alcohol content to volume ratio. Imperial stouts are, as the name says, they are royal. They are higher in roastiness, they are more flavors, and they are basically the premium stouts that you can get. Do let me know how you like this episode, and if you have any recommendations of book, coffee, or beer you'd like me to discuss. My email ID is booksandbrewpodcast@gmail.com. For more such episodes, subscribe to my show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Please do like and rate this show on whichever platform you are listening. This will help fight the unjust recommendation algorithms out there and help this show get some justice by moving up the ranking list and reaching more people. Until next episode, spread the word, keep reading, happy listening.